Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. Today on the show, it's Bold Predictions Part 2. I'm going to tell you today how many games the Timberwolves are going to win before the calendar turns to 2026. It's a big number, and I'll tell you why, plus other bold predictions upcoming next.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I am the host of Locked On Wolves. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Football season started last night, continues tonight actually, and right now new customers can bet just $5, and if your first bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets. Download the app at FanDuel.com to get started. Happy Friday, everybody. Happy weekend. Hopefully you've had a fantastic week so far. Today is episode 2 of Bold Predictions. Episode 1 was on Wednesday, and I've got 3 more good ones for you today, and I'm ready to go out on a limb a little bit. I'll explain myself, the backstory here if you missed Wednesday's episode. First of all, please go back and listen or watch on YouTube. But the way I'm approaching this is it's not just like a crazy bold prediction like Ant's going to score 85 in a game this year, because I don't know, that could happen. Pretty unlikely that he scores 85 points in a game this year, right? That would be a pretty bold prediction. These are predictions, things that are unlikely to happen or maybe would take a bit of a stretch, but they're completely realistic. They're things that are certainly on the table to happen. And, you certainly wouldn't, it doesn't take something that's only been done once in the history of the NBA, before for these things to happen. So Timberwolves related bold predictions. I'm going to start with a team one. I'm going to hit you with an individual one for Ant next, and then we'll go to another team one to close today. First, though, a big thank you off the top for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. Wherever you listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on YouTube, or you can watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. All right. So I want to start with a team prediction. Ready for this? Okay. I'm not giving a win total prediction yet. And I spent a lot of time the other day on, hey, I think right now I'd have the Wolves third in the West. I know the conventional wisdom is the Wolves are fourth at best. And it's, I don't know if it's wisdom. Conventional thought right now, the national thought is that OKC, Denver, Houston in some order are all ahead of Minnesota. I'm not going to give you a win total prediction. I'm not going to say anything other than what I've already said about how I think they still finish third in the Western Conference this year. But what I will tell you is that I think on New Year's Day, when the calendar turns to 2026, the Timberwolves will have a record of 24-7. And you know what? While we're at it, I'm going to adjust it. We'll call it an even 25 wins. I'm going to say that Minnesota has 25 wins, is 25-6 when the calendar flips to January 1st, 2026. I'll tell you why. The schedule, as we talked about when the schedule was released a couple of weeks ago, I did a show on kind of high points of the schedule, what to watch, etc. The schedule's very favorable for the first 2.5 months, and it gets really difficult in the second half of the season. Not second half really, because that's not the midway point, but the latter 2/3 of the season, the January through April portion of the regular season schedule. So by me saying they have 25 wins on January 1st, that's not me saying they're going to win 60 plus games. It's not me saying they're going to be the 1 seed in the West. They probably will be in 1 or maybe 2 in the West if they have 25 wins on January 1st. But I'm not saying that's where they're going to finish. I'm not saying that this isn't a full year bold prediction. I'm not going that bold. I'm not going to say they win 60 and get the 1 seed. I'm going to say they have 25 wins on New Year's Day for a couple of reasons. I'll start with the schedule, then I'll get to the actual team portion, because I do think that, well, actually, no, let's start with the team portion. So, me saying I would take the over on their 50.5 win total, which by the way has dropped to 49.5 on FanDuel from where it opened a couple months ago. Is because I think Minnesota far underperformed what they actually were last year. They had bad luck in close late games. I've talked about this a lot before, so I don't want to rehash all of it. But their Pythagorean record, their point differential says they were a 54-win team. They won 49 games. Yes, there's late game execution issues, both on the players and on the coaching staff. Just missing shots. Some of that's bad luck. Some of it's execution. It's both, right? But it takes a special set of circumstances to be that bad below your point differential and your Pythagorean win-loss record. It's something the Wolves have done, like, I think, what did I say? 3 times in the last 25 years, they've been 4 games or more worse, and they've never overperformed it by like 2 or 3. So it's not just dumb luck. There is some other stuff in there, but there's some luck involved. There really is. I think that that's the biggest thing. I also think that another year of Randle playing with Gobert and playing with Anthony Edwards, I think this is being completely undersold at the national level. Think of how big of a leap the Wolves made year one with Rudy to year two with Rudy. I would put this in a similar category. They had to play a completely different way last year with Julius Randle instead of Karl-Anthony Towns. And we saw them start to figure it out the second part of the season. It was interrupted by the Randle injury and also the Gobert injury. And then, of course, we saw it work really well in the first two rounds of the playoffs and break down against OKC, but everyone broke down against OKC. So I think Minnesota is better. I think I would easily take the over on the 49.5, and I would take it on the 50.5. I think they're better than the 49 wins they turned in last year. I know they lost to Alexander Walker, but to return 7 of your 8 rotation guys and what, 10 of your top 11 in the rotation, 9 of your top, however you want to say it, really 9 of your top 10, 10 of your top 11, that's pretty good continuity for a conference finals team. And when your best player is as young and as talented as Anthony Edwards, there's going to be growth, not regression. And in just another year of these guys playing together, this team will be better this year. On top of that, turning our attention to the schedule is so easy. And I know that there's like this whole idea that, you don't want to, because we don't know, right? This is based on what teams were last year, what we expect them to be this year. I don't see a world in which like Utah is good this year, though, right? Like we know Utah's not going to be good. New Orleans is obviously a bit of a, who knows. But in the first 2.5 months of the season, so mid-October through the end of December, Minnesota plays the Pelicans twice. They play the Jazz twice. They play the Kings twice. All teams they should be significantly better than. They only play 2 total games versus Boston and OKC. They play them each once. And they only play 3 total games, against LA teams. I think they have 2 Lakers games and 1 Clippers game. And most people would say the Clippers and Lakers are in the top 6 in the West. And some people, not me, not most people, but some people would have one or both LA teams ahead of Minnesota in the West. And they only play them 3 total times. And there is along with that, no true West Coast swing over the first 2.5 months for Minnesota, which is always the most difficult. Usually there's 2 or 3 of those a year. They do play at Phoenix and at Sacramento, but it's on a road trip where they also only go to OKC, and then they fly home and get an extra day of rest before they play the Celtics. So not an easy stretch, but only 2 true West Coast games, only 1 in a Pacific Coast time zone. They start the year with a mini West Coast swing at Portland, at LA. But that's it. They don't play any other true West Coast games through December. They don't have to do a full West Coast swing until, a 2 or more game. They have a 3-game West Coast swing at the very end of February into March. They've got a longer one, which is the more difficult one in mid-March. And that's kind of it. They have a couple of these 2-gamers on the West Coast, which is great. They also, this is crazy, from the start of the season to the end of December, they only play 4 back-to-backs over the course of 10 weeks, 2.5 months. They have 4 back-to-back sets in January alone. So Minnesota has to bank 20-plus wins, really, by New Year's Eve, by New Year's Day, before they have 4 back-to-backs in January. And, of course, the schedule gets a lot more difficult once you flip the calendar to January as well. They play Cleveland in consecutive games within the first 10 days, and then it goes Cleveland for 2 games, then San Antonio, at Milwaukee, at Houston, at San Antonio. That's a brutal stretch. Later in the month, you get Golden State twice in a row, then at Dallas and Oklahoma City at home right after that. That's all in the month of January, with 4 back-to-backs spread in there. So you have to bank as many wins as you can before the calendar flips. And the schedule is advantageous to do that. And not only do I think the Wolves overall will be better, you got to bank them before the schedule gets tough. And remember, last year the team was healthy until January, really, until the DiVincenzo injury in January, for the most part. I know there was some early season kind of, guys banged up a little bit, but nothing significant, no major missed time until Dante got hurt in late January. So if this team can go 25-6 in the remaining calendar year of 2025, have 25 wins going into January, I mean, like, at that point, we are like, you could legitimately start talking about a 55 win team or so. And I think that's entirely on the table. It's a bold prediction, yes, because there's obviously still tough games in there, but I think the Wolves have 25 wins when they roll into Miami on January 3rd. They play New Year's Eve at Atlanta and then couple day gap in there. They go to Miami on January 3rd. I think they'll be 25-6 when they get to Miami on January 3rd. All right. I've got a individual player prediction for Anthony Edwards related to his scoring. We'll get to that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our title sponsors at FanDuel. The NFL season started last night, Eagles and Cowboys. And tonight, there's another game. What is it? Chiefs, Chargers, I think, from Brazil. FanDuel is making sure that you are ready for kickoff last night, tonight, and all day Sunday and Monday night with a can't-miss offer at FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. There are tons of fun games to look at for this weekend. I said the other day, I thought both the Vikings and Packers lines were pretty good. If we're talking just NFC North, the Vikings play the Bears and the Packers play the Lions. So lots of NFC North action, all the NFC North action, literally, in the first day of the season with some fair lines. So go check those out at FanDuel. I took the over on Eagles and Cowboys on Thursday night. Turned out pretty well. I like the point totals. I think those are fun to root for scoring, or it's fun when you expect it to be a slugfest. That happens too. It's so quick and easy to use the FanDuel app. It's the best way to add a little more energy to your Sundays. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. All right. So my Anthony Edwards bold prediction. I made a prediction on Wednesday's show. One of them was that the Timberwolves would have a top. I should have rattled these off at the top, but I'm not going to say them all because just if you missed it, go listen to Wednesday or watch Wednesday's show. I said one of them was that I said Minnesota would be a top 5 offense. And part of it was like Nikhil gets replaced by Terrence Shannon and Rob Dillingham, both who are superior, have higher ceilings, I should say, as offensive players. I think Randle will be more comfortable. I think Jaden McDaniels is likely continuing to improve offensively, but also that Anthony Edwards would continue to improve overall. Related to that, my next bold prediction, which is maybe the most difficult one of all my predictions so far to achieve, is that Anthony Edwards will lead the league in scoring this season. Okay? So here's my reasoning. Believe it or not, Ant actually finished 4th in the NBA in scoring last season, and I'm going by points per game scoring title, right? So SGA led the league with 32.7 points per game. Giannis was second with 30.4. Then it was Jokic at 29.6, which I think was a career high, and Ant was 27.6, less than a point ahead of Jason Tatum and exactly a point ahead of Kevin Durant. So here's my thinking. Let's talk about Ant himself first, and then I'll talk about some of the competition. So Anthony Edwards, as I talked about before, has increased his scoring average each of the last few years by a point and a half. I mean, he scored, like, if you go all the way back, right, as a rookie, 19 points a game, then it was 21, so it went up 2. Then it goes up 3.3 points a game. He becomes an all-star in 22-23. Goes up 1.3 points from 22-23 to 23-24, and then the next year it went up 1.7 points. So if we say it goes up another point and a half, that gets us to almost 29.5 points per game. I think it goes up by even more than that because now that we know he's a accurate volume 3-point shooter, he can score off the dribble, he can shoot off the dribble, he can shoot, catch and shoot. He's got pretty much unlimited range. If he's going to 39-40% on 10 threes a game, and we saw the second part of last year and into the playoffs, getting to the free throw line that much more often, he's starting to figure out how to do that. And we know he was working on a mid-range game this offseason. So if he maintains the 3-point volume and accuracy, which I think is, I'd say it's likely. If his usage increases just a little by getting into the paint a little bit more, by, I don't want him to shoot a lot more mid-range. In fact, I'd rather him still shoot even less mid-range overall. But if that's a tool in his toolbox and he's more effective at the end of games, and he just continues to improve across the board, I just think he continues to score more points. Like, that's the natural progression. I mean, look at SGA. I'm not saying he's SGA. He's not yet. And he obviously doesn't play in the same way as SGA. But that scoring leap is going to happen. And it's been a methodical march to 30 points per game for Ant. And if it doesn't happen this year, it happens in 2 years for sure. In his age, at that point, it'd be his age 26 season. But this year in his age 24 season, I think he gets to about 30 points per game and sees a leap of 3.5 points per game, which I think will be enough to lead the league in scoring. SGA was almost 33 a game last year. That could maintain. That's going to be the biggest hurdle. Giannis could actually need to score more. Obviously, no Dame. Like, that team looks different. Jokic was an outlier last year for him, averaging almost 30 a game. The team was like, it was Jokic. That was the Denver team. And then eventually Jamal Murray came to the party a little bit. I think this Denver team is obviously deeper. They had a better offseason. They've added pieces. They're going to score more, whether it's Tim Hardaway Jr. off the bench or, some of the tweaks they're making, sending out Michael Porter Jr. and shoring up their starting lineup. I just think he's going to need to score less, and there's going to be more other guys who want to shoot the ball more. And we know Jokic would prefer to pass over, just jack up a bunch of shots. So I think Edwards scores more than Jokic. We know Tatum's out. Durant may score more in Houston than he did in Phoenix. That's entirely on the table. And then other guys that were in the 26-point range, Jalen Brunson, Devin Booker, Cade Cunningham, always possible those dudes all score quite a bit or score even more. Probably not. Well, maybe Booker, I guess, with no Durant. So it's possible. But I'm going to say Ant jumps over Jokic and battles with SGA and Giannis, and ultimately that Ant wins the scoring title this season. I don't think it's all that far-fetched. I think it is he's going to win at least one scoring title, and there's a real chance it could happen this year. So that's my next prediction. All right, last bold prediction that I'm going to start now, and then we're also going to finish the show. I've got a Wolves note that I want to get to about a player toward the end of the rotation that we'll get to at the end of the show. So my last bold prediction is related to the Timberwolves' pace of play. So also related to their offense, which we talked about the other day when I said they'd be a top 5 offense. The Timberwolves' pace of play last year, there's a lot of different ways you can look at it. If you just look at Basketball Reference and you look at the pace statistic there, they were 24th in pace. Now, Basketball Reference, the way they calculate it is a little bit different depending on what site you go to. So they're 24th in pace there. If you go to Cleaning the Glass, which is where I pull most stats like this because they filter out garbage time, they filter out possessions at the end of quarters that often end up in half court heaves, which, by the way, if you missed that news, it's like, what is it? Shots beyond midcourt with less than 3 seconds to play or something are going to not be counted against field goal percentages now to encourage more attempts from there, which is a good thing. Also sad that we had to get to that point, but here we are. Anyway, I didn't mean to have a get off my lawn moment there, but I guess I did. The Timberwolves' overall pace of play, according to Cleaning the Glass. So all transition plays, the way it's measured at Cleaning the Glass is they look at what percent of offensive possessions started with a transition play. Minnesota was 27th in the league last year overall at 13.4%. Only the Phoenix Suns, Charlotte Hornets, and Boston Celtics were slower than the Wolves or ran at a lower frequency. Now, off of steals, this is the same as it was 2 years ago. Minnesota was pretty middle of the pack. They were 17th in frequency of transition opportunities off of steals, but off of live rebounds, they were dead last in the NBA. So when they ripped down a defensive board, they ran less than any other team in the entire NBA last season. I think Minnesota goes from a bottom 10 team in pace, and again, off of rebounds, according to Clean the Glass, dead last. But no matter how you slice it, 24th or worst in transition opportunities and pace of play. I'm combining. I realize I'm combining those things, right? Basketball Reference pace of play and transition opportunities on Clean the Glass. But again, they play slow. That's the story here. I think they go from bottom 10 to top 10. That's my bold prediction related to how the team executes offensively. I think it's going to shift dramatically from a slow team to a faster team. They're not going to be the fastest team in the league. They're not going to be the original Chris Finch, Jared Vanderbilt, Patrick Beverly Wolves. They're not going to play like wreaking havoc, but they're going to play a lot faster in a lot more situations this year. And I'll explain why I believe that here next to close out the show. All right, my final bold prediction of this two-part series is that Minnesota will play at a top 10 pace this year. Go from a bottom 10 to a top 10 pace. Why? Well, number one, I think Chris Finch wants to. He's always said he wants to play faster. He's been limited a bit personnel-wise. Rudy Gobert doesn't play fast, and I mean, that's the biggest limiting factor. They also play big as a team, which limits it a little bit. Also, Anthony Edwards likes to slow things down. He likes to kind of gather himself, shoot the pull-up three, kind of waltz his way into a pick and roll situation as a ball handler and kind of orchestrate that way. He doesn't mind slowing. In fact, he prefers to slow things down. We've seen Finch implore him to play faster at times. We've heard Chris Finch say it in the media. We got to play faster. We want to play faster, etc. We're headed that direction. And I've talked about this related to what Minnesota did in the draft by drafting Jean Béranger in the first round and knowing that he is supposed to be the heir apparent to Rudy Gobert. Rob Dillingham, if you look at Minnesota's lineups last year, across the board, they played slow, right? We talked about this. But lineups with Rob Dillingham were a little bit faster. They played at a faster pace than lineups without Rob Dillingham. Not surprising. And you look at any other combination, and there was really no other player that had as big of an impact on picking up the pace than Rob Dillingham. So that's the direction Tim Conley has started to move. I think the Béranger piece, the letting Luka Garza leave piece, the not retaining Jesse Edwards piece, it all suggests we're going to play a little bit smaller, a little bit more often, or maybe not smaller. Béranger is still a huge human, but faster. And it's not going to happen immediately. And that's why it's a bold prediction. It's more likely than not, they're still at best a middle of the pack offensive team in terms of pace this year. My bold prediction is it gets to top 10 because of maybe it's less minutes for Rudy, less minutes for Mike Conley, and ultimately more minutes for Rob Dillingham. And the biggest factor here is Terrence Shannon Jr. If TJ Shannon gets to initiate any offense this year, we saw him have a chance to do it a bit in Vegas Summer League. This thing's going to move fast. That's what he did best in college was just push in transition, be an absolute demon in transition. And he did it in stretches in the NBA last year. And when he's on the floor, it's going to go quick. You got other young guys, Jaylen Clark, Rob Dillingham. If they get an opportunity, they're going to be sprinting down the floor and playing fast. We know when Julius Randle has the ball in his hands, he can push pace. He doesn't always. Again, he's part of the reason they played slow last year. And honestly, overall, is a slower pace player than Karl-Anthony Towns. But I think that the direction this team is moving from a personnel standpoint, the guys that are going to see more minutes this year, primarily TJ Shannon. And then the last piece is, starting in January last year, give or take, toward the end of the season, we know Minnesota rebounded the basketball a lot more on the offensive glass. Like that was a concerted effort from Chris Finch and the Timberwolves to crash the offensive glass and generate more offense and more offensive opportunities there. And that led to more offensive chances in the half court that weren't coming out of half court offense, but off of rebounds. And on the defensive glass, if they can find their way into Minnesota, because the way they crash the glass on offense now, it changes the way they get back defensively a little bit. And on the flip side, if this team can continue to improve on the defensive glass, which they did improve last year over the year before pretty dramatically, there's going to be more opportunities to run in the open floor. Losing Nickeil will hurt in terms of generating more steals to then potentially generate more fast break opportunities, high pace opportunities. But Jaylen Clark might be able to step into that role. TJ Shannon might be able to step into that role in terms of creating opponent turnovers. I don't think necessarily to the level of Nickeil, at least not right away, but there's upside there as well. So I think the combination of the adjustment in playing style, the tweaking of the guys who are part of the rotation, and ultimately where this team's going as a roster, I think they start to play a little faster this year. And I guess in the case of this bold prediction, play a lot faster to go from bottom 10 to top 10 in pace. There's a real chance that something like that happens this year for the Wolves. All right. Speaking of Jaylen Clark, there was an article at Hoops Rumors, which I love to use Hoops Rumors, especially in the offseason and around the trade deadline at hoopsrumors.com, from earlier in the week, 5 under the radar players to watch in 2025. And there was a Timberwolves player mentioned. There was also Cam Spencer, Nigel Hayes-Davis from the Suns, Cam Spencer, of course, from the Grizzlies, and then a Celtics tandem, which I thought was interesting, Luka Garza and Josh Minott, which I don't really want to spend a lot of time talking about the Celtics, but it talks about how they're under the radar. I think Minott probably has a better shot at, I think Garza may actually get rotation minutes initially, but I think in terms of actual impact, Minott's got the better shot at leaving an impact there in Boston with a team that doesn't have Luke Cornett or Porzingis anymore, and Al Horford as well. Like, they needed front court help. And I think you could see Minott playing a small ball 4 role there at times too. Anyway, let's talk about the Wolves. The guy that I mentioned a minute ago that is listed here is Jaylen Clark. and listed by Hoops Rumors as having a potential impact as an under-the-radar guy, mostly because of the loss of Nickeil Alexander-Walker. And then they say all eyes are on Rob Dillingham and Terrence Shannon Jr. to take steps forward. Look for Clark and perhaps Leonard Miller, which I thought was a funny side note, to gain more of a foothold in the rotation. No real other reason other than him being a reliable depth option and Minnesota losing or moving on from Nickeil. Losing Nickeil. Obviously, they didn't want to move on from Nickeil. I think, Jaylen Clark is the name that gets forgotten when you talk about Dillingham and Shannon, because the upside to Dillingham and Shannon on offense, at least, is far greater than that of Jaylen Clark. And I'm curious to see if Clark can maintain, we talked about this in Summer League, can he maintain his 40+% shooting from the outside last year? If that's the case, and he can be a plus defender and a plus shooter, then there's a spot for him, right? There's a 3-and-D role. I'm dubious that once he shoots more than 93s in an NBA season, that number, I think, is going to drop. I'm dubious it maintains. I mean, we saw the track record at UCLA. He's a below average shooter. I hope I'm wrong. I hope it sticks. But if it doesn't, he's pretty much a 10th guy who, depending on the matchup, it could be the right matchup. You put him out there and he's going to lock down. But he's not really a threat offensively to the opponent. And so I think he's pretty clearly 10th of the depth chart. A viable rotation option, and certainly an NBA caliber defender. I would argue one of the better point of attack defenders in the league, period, full stop. He was the best in college basketball 2 years ago before the Achilles injury, and he was awesome last year when given the opportunity. So I think he's going to play more nights than not, in my opinion. And I think he probably ends up playing more than Rob Dillingham, at least in the first couple months of the season. But I think TJ Shannon's clearly ahead of him on the depth chart. All right. That's all I got for you today. A bit of kind of preview on programming here. So next week we go back to 5 shows. So 5 shows a week starting next week. We're just a couple weeks away from training camp. Also on Monday, our Locked On NBA Top 100 Players is being released. So as I said the other day, I'm going to spend a lot of time going through that list next week, reacting to the list versus my list, where Wolves players are ranked, what other Locked On hosts thought about Wolves players compared to what I thought, and also any other notable guys on that top 100 list. So we'll do that on Monday's show and throughout next week. It'll be a ton of fun as we start getting you ready for training camp. Following that, we'll pretty much be ready to move into our player preview series as we gear up for Media Day and training camp here in just a couple of weeks. Big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. A reminder that for your second listen, you can check out the Locked On NBA podcast. Our guys Doug, Matt, and Hayes do an awesome job covering the league throughout the offseason and keeping you informed. You can find Locked On NBA on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, just like this show. Of course, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.